Excellent. Hey everyone. Matthew Coles here, and I've got Joshua Samuel here as well, and we are here to present on AWS reInvent, do a quick recap for developers working within large enterprise. So this is for our Australia customers specifically. Anyone can feel free to join in and watch though. We're more than happy for anyone on Twitch to come in and join the session as well. So yeah, welcome to Australia and New Zealand developers. We hope that you enjoy this run through. What I'll do is I'll quickly pass over to Josh and he'll give you a bit more information on what we're going to go through today.
Thanks, Matt. Today we've got with us four solutions architects in town. So myself, Joshua, Matt, who you just heard from, Paul and Nick, who will also be speaking today. Alongside them, we've got Alan and Jesse in the chat stream. So please feel free to type into the chat any questions that you want, and we'll either answer them as we go or Jesse and Alan will attempt to answer them for you. So, Matt, what did you think of Vegas last year? Did you get out of town at all?
Yeah, so I didn't get out to Vegas in 2020, but I got to 2019 Vegas. I still got merch in 2020, so I'm very happy about that. It's always really fun. reInvent's a great conference, and I think even though we weren't able to do it in person in Vegas this particular year for the 2020 session, I still think it was pretty amazing, and we got a lot more content than what we actually usually get at reInvents.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching many hours of video rather than lining up in queues to go into rooms. But there was definitely a lot more content there than anyone can reasonably watch. And in November, I know a lot of people were very busy, and even with the free tickets last year, it was still hard for people to make time. So that's why we're doing a super quick recap. We're going to try and condense the over 2,000 hours of video down to less than 90 minutes. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So
one of the things I'd be interested in... go, Josh.
Yes, Matt?
No, I was going to say I'd be interested to see where everyone's from. We've specifically invited Australia and New Zealand developers, but I know that there's a whole world watching there. So give us a call out which city you're in, whereabouts in the world you are, and I'd also be interested, considering this is the developer community, what language are you currently using and enjoying? At the moment, I'm doing some Flutter workshops, so I'm using a bit of Dart, but I thought it'd be interesting to see where everyone comes from. We've got a ton of people on the chat from AWS, so yeah, let's get the conversation going.
I think all of us here today on presenting are from Melbourne.
Indeed.
Yeah. Maybe let's start straight into it, because I know we've got a lot of content. Josh, do you want to tell us about what's happening in the world of compute? Some of my favorite updates are in here.
Yeah, sure, Matt. So on compute, we already had at AWS the fastest networking with P4D instances, 400 gigabit networking. We had the most powerful ML training instances with P4D, and the most powerful ML inference instances with the Inf1. We also had the largest high memory instances for SAP with 24 terabytes of RAM. That's huge. Not disk space, but RAM. And we're the only cloud provider that supports Intel, AMD, and ARM processors.
I was grabbed on instances launch in ARM, and I shot up a couple of instances. I've got a bunch of Raspberry Pis at home, so I'm a big fan of that architecture. But of course, I've got computers at home that use AMD and Intel too, so it's great to see that we're kind of supporting everyone in that regard.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite announcements on the compute side was the C6GN instance, which delivers 40% better price performance over the current generation C5N, built with the same Nitro system for managing the whole virtual environment, but powered by Gravitron 2, and made for compute-intensive workloads with high networking needs. So the 100 gigabit networking and support for the elastic fabric adapter. So for me, very exciting. You'll see at the bottom of our slide, we've got the learn more bit at the bottom. All of our presentations from reInvent are now on YouTube. So you can Google or search up YouTube for CMP 302 and look on the further slides there to get the other YouTube links. Probably even more exciting than the Gravitron 2 announcements was the Mac instances. How many of you have a Mac Mini sitting under a monitor somewhere? And how many of you, when lockdowns hit around the world, were stuck with either the Mac Mini sitting in an office with no one around it to reboot it if needed, or you had to pick a random developer to take that Mac Mini home with you? So people have been asking for Mac instances for a long time, and we're finally able to actually bring them to you. So generally available now in Singapore, rolling out globally over time. We've now got a Mac instance, which is a Mac Mini, specifically designed around development lifecycle and development tooling. So we've now got, this is built with the Nitro system, and yeah, what do you think, Matt?
I think it's pretty cool. So I started off in iOS development land back in Objective days before they had automatic reference counting. Call out on the chat if you came from that kind of era as well and you know what I'm talking about. But you know, I've had a number of Mac Minis sitting underneath my desk. I had a Mac Mini from Apple quite recently sitting under there as well, and I think it's fantastic. Now I can basically use my Unity projects, for my Swift projects, like whatever I'm doing, I'll be able to use you know, an instance in the cloud rather than having this computer running under the desk that I'm used to. And also, like, you know, when I was working at other companies, I guess the co-location facilities that we'd set these things up in, you know, it was a lot of headache to get them provisioned, set them up in co-location, and then if you had problems, it was really hard to get them fixed. And when you've got a significant application, you know, you might be doing multiple builds a day, and it takes hours to do a build. And so it's great to finally have something that's going to be working 100% of the time, accessible in the cloud, and you can fit it into your standard CI/CD pipelines. We are working on blogs to show you how to set up like Fastlane and, you know, the code series of tools at AWS to work with this. You know, we're going to have some Jenkins examples as well. So we're all busy building content to show you guys how you can use them for build servers. But I reckon this is it might have been even number one.
Yeah, and integrated with your VPC, you've got AMI, so you can, you know, you're starting with a fresh image every time that you know the contents of. EBS storage, put it behind a load balancer if you want. All of that is built in as part of our Nitro infrastructure and the AWS infrastructure. What I found really neat was seeing this picture of what it actually looked like. And you can see here the Nitro side of things is to the side here, plugged directly into an actual Mac Mini. And we look after and we make sure that it can be rebooted and all the rest of it for you so that you don't need to worry about having someone go in there and hit the reset button or anything like that. It's all good and secure. Beyond the Mac and beyond the Gravitron, we launched further new instances. We launched the G4 AD with the best price performance for graphics workloads in the cloud, with the AMD Radeon Pro V520 GPUs. We're offering 45% better price performance compared to the G4 DN. What this can do, this can have OpenGL, DirectX, and Vulkan API compatibility for your rendering, for all sorts of GPU-intensive jobs. And
yeah, machine learning's probably a call out there. Games development, movie rendering, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be pretty awesome for. Yeah, these things take so long generally, right? So the more GPU power you've got, the faster and more productive you can be. You can spend an entire day generating just a couple of frames of imagery, getting it rendered.
Absolutely. And how does this compare to your home gaming PC as far as power goes?
I have managed to secure myself one of the GeForce 3000 series. I won't tell anyone which particular one it is, but it's a pretty good graphics card, but this would definitely give it a run for its money. I'm mostly using mine for gaming though, not rendering, so yeah, no, it's pretty sweet.
Awesome. Beyond that, we've got the D3 and D3EN, an iteration from our D2 instances with local storage, with the same large local storage, but with the next generation Intel Xeon scalable processors. So if you're doing extreme scale distributed file systems and you need that local storage on the instance rather than EBS, that's where this comes in. You might be doing GPFS or Lustre in a cluster. These are perfect for that. So this is your refresh. It's, you may as well move across pretty quickly to this if you're using D2 at the moment. Already launched in Sydney as well. So that is a good one there. We've then got the R5B. Now, this announcement by itself was interesting in that we're now offering the highest IOPS and throughput for block storage in EC2. In fact, the IOPS offered on this instance are well beyond what a single EBS volume can provide, which is absolutely great. I'll come to what you can use that with in a minute, but this is 3 times the performance of EBS compared to the R5, delivering 7,500 megabits per second of bandwidth and 260,000 IOPS of EBS performance for the fastest block storage of any of our instance types on EC2 and in the cloud. So these R5B instances were specifically designed for larger databases, analytics workloads, other workloads that require higher EBS performance per instance, so that you can migrate your on-premise workloads to AWS without re-architecting any applications. And then finally, we've got the M5ZN. And this is the high-performance, fastest Intel Xeon scalable processor in the cloud. This instance is 4.5 gigahertz processor, so much faster when you need that single-threaded performance. You might be doing high-frequency trading or other low-latency, high-throughput type workloads. So a combination of high per-core compute performance and a balanced memory footprint. So all of these very exciting. You can see in CMP 201 more detail on each of them. So I'm going to switch across quickly to storage. And to go with the R5B instance type, we've also got the IO2 Block Express. Now, here we've heard from customers that you've been building RAID using EBS volumes in order to get the performance that you want. And that has complicated implications for your operational reliability. What we've now built, hearing our customers' feedback, is the first SAN built for the cloud. So behind the scenes, we will do the aggregation for you to give you 4 times higher throughput, high IOPS and capacity than IO2. So 260,000 IOPS, coincidentally matching the R5B, and giving you fault tolerance across multiple data centers as well. So this is an amazing service if you have those really high capacity things. Matt, have you seen much demand for this? What's your thoughts from a TAM perspective?
Yeah, we've actually seen a lot of demand for this. I forgot to call out at the very start. You can see I've got a cat in the background. Apologies. I thought I forgot the call out at the very start. If you want to know more about any of these particular things that we're showing off, reach out to your technical account managers or your solution architects within each of your accounts. We're more than happy to guide you through each of these. I've seen a ton of demand for the new GP3 EBS type stuff. I've seen a ton of demand for Mac Mini instances. Lambda has some awesome stuff, so I'm sure that you'll have something that you'll want to see more of, and we're always going to be available here to help you out. So just reach out to your technical account manager or SA.
Thanks, Matt. And speaking of GP3, it's almost as if you knew what my next slide was.
I was hoping. It's one of my favorite things. Yeah.
So GP3 is something that I would highly recommend that people evaluate as soon as they can. With GP3's launch, we've lowered the price by 20% compared to GP2 volumes, while raising the baseline IOPS. So you're getting more throughput and at 1,000 megabytes a second and more IOPS than your GP2 for less price. So this is something, switch it on straight away. You can do an almost live cutover for this. This is ideal for relational and non-relational databases, enterprise applications, containerized workloads, almost anything. So if you're not using provisioned IOPS, go ahead, switch your non-prod environment over now, see what it looks like, watch your bill on EBS drop a little bit, and get your better performance. So Matt, have you seen a few people start to switch this over yet?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of demand for this particular one as well. Coming from the technical account manager space, being able to save on anything in your AWS accounts are very, very handy, and GP3 can be a significant savings moving from GP2, right? So definitely reach out to your technical account managers, definitely work this into part of your cost savings plan. It's a quick win, really easy to do, and then you've knocked off a large percentage of your EBS bill just by doing it.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Now, Nick has popped up on our screen here. Nick wants to talk. Hi, Nick. Nick wants to talk about containers. So we're going to switch over to our containers track. You've probably heard enough of me speaking. So take it away, Nick.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for the great session for the compute capacity and storage. So now let's talk about something running on top of those capacity. So AWS has been the #1 place for customers to run containers, and actually 80% of all the containers in the cloud run on AWS. Many customers told us they need to run container clusters across the boundary of one cloud. For migration, compliance, or other reasons, they want to run a hybrid cluster between their data centers and the cloud, which is why we are launching the AWS ECS Anywhere. And this comes in 2021. In the last years, customers have asked for more flexibility in where they can deploy containers using Amazon ECS. They had an increasing number of use cases that require applications to run outside of AWS regions and closer to the other services they're running from different locations. Customers love the simplicity of Amazon ECS and the fact that it just works. However, the deployment requirements may go beyond the AWS-owned infrastructure, and sometimes it could be expensive to use different container management technologies as a mix for different deployment targets. So Amazon Elastic Container Service, in short ECS, Anywhere, is a capability in Amazon ECS that enables customers to easily run and manage container-based applications from on-premises, including like virtual machines, bare metal servers, and other customer-managed infrastructure. So with this announcement, customers will now be able to use ECS on any computing infrastructure, whether in AWS or any other locations, without installing or operating any container orchestration software by themselves.
Wow, how can that even work, Nick? That's amazing.
So from the technical side, let's say from inside the virtual machine, once there is a SSM agent being installed on the virtual machine to be like a running task in the background, then the virtual machine will become what we call the AWS managed instance. So a new converged version of the existing open source Amazon ECS agent can be installed on those managed instances, for example, leveraging the SSM distributor. And then those instances will be registered into an ECS cluster previously defined in the control plane in the region. Then actually when you're looking at launch your containers ECS task, or if you define your ECS service, you will have a third option beside EC2 and Fargate. This third option is called external. Then you can schedule your containers as ECS tasks on those compute resource running from pretty much anywhere. How's that sound, Josh?
Oh, that sounds awesome. And I can picture just how it's going to look in the console. I can't wait for this to go GA and launch everywhere.
Good to know. And since we're talking about ECS, we have another popular container orchestration tool in the cloud, which is EKS. And then we have the EKS Anywhere also as another offering coming in 2021. The Amazon EKS Anywhere is a new deployment option for Amazon EKS that enables customers to easily create and operate Kubernetes cluster from on-premises, including on your own virtual machines and the bare metal servers. So EKS Anywhere provides an installable software package for creating and operating Kubernetes clusters from on-premises with automation tooling for cluster lifecycle support. It creates clusters based on Amazon EKS distro. It is the same Kubernetes distribution we use as the backbone for EKS for clusters on AWS. EKS Anywhere enables the customer to automate cluster management, reduce the support cost, and eliminate the redundant effort of using multiple tools for operating Kubernetes clusters. The EKS Anywhere is fully supported by AWS. In addition, you can leverage the EKS console to view your Kubernetes clusters running at anywhere.
Wow. Can you tell us a bit more about the EKS distro? Can we see that, or is it open source or anything?
That is exactly the next part of the content that I would like to share with all of us here. So actually, after operating Amazon EKS at scale for over the past 2 years, here we're talking about like millions of clusters of all different sizes around the world. We are actually in a position to identify which part works, what component running on the clusters is valuable for customers and how. And we've learned that customers want a consistent experience from on-premises and in the cloud for the migration purposes or enable the hybrid cloud setups. So you can deploy EKS distro anywhere your applications needs to run. You can deploy clusters and let AWS take care of the testing and the tracking of those updates from the Kubernetes community, such as like dependencies and patches as well. And each EKS distro verifies the new Kubernetes versions for the compatibility. The source code, open source tool, and settings are provided for reproducible builds. So EKS distro will provide external support, like extended support for Kubernetes with the builds of the previous versions and also with the updates with the latest security patches. The EKS distro is available as an open source project on GitHub. Here, I want to mention 2 things you need to know to run Kubernetes with this offering. Firstly, you need a trusted distribution that can be deployed anywhere. In this case, it is the EKS distro. Second, once you move from development to production environment, you will need some tools to manage and run your application at scale. And here comes the EKS Anywhere. So if you currently manage your own Kubernetes clusters, you can leverage EKS distro to standardize on a secure, stable, and community-supported version of Kubernetes runtime across your environment and leverage open source tooling to create, manage EKS distro clusters. And the EKS Anywhere as a management tool, it runs the EKS distro and provides automation tooling that simplifies the creation of the cluster, the administration, and the operation on the infrastructure such as bare metal, vSphere, cloud, any cloud-based virtual machines with the default configuration for logging, monitoring, networking, storage, and also brings those opinionated tooling and additional components you will need to run Kubernetes in production, such as cluster installation, lifecycle management, observability, cluster backup, policy management, you just name them. And here, since we mentioned EKS, there's another thing we've announced is the EKS add-ons. So previously, when customer run the EKS cluster, actually the master nodes are managed by AWS. And sometimes customer wants to install some add-ons to make use of from the master nodes. So the add-ons are actually common operational software which extend the operational functionality of Kubernetes. You can use EKS to install and keep the software up to date when you start the EKS cluster. You can select like the add-ons you would like to run besides the cluster creation, including tooling such as Kubernetes, observability, networking, autoscaling, even with some AWS service integrations. So at this stage, the add-on with support to be installed on a EKS cluster is the Amazon VPC CNI. After talking about the container orchestration tools, as you felt that we have now making the container orchestration tool to go beyond the boundary of the AWS cloud. How about the registry? Actually, many developers already manage container image privately with the organization using Amazon Elastic Container Registry, in short ECR, for those private repositories. The Amazon ECR hosts images in a highly available and scalable architecture. It enables developers to reliably deploy container for their own applications. However, when looking to share images publicly for anyone to find or download, whether free or licensed use, the image must be uploaded actually, or pushed to a public website or registry. So Josh, how many times have you been experiencing things like your Docker pull was failed because of your traffic has been throttled?
I've had that a number of times, and especially when I'm going through a corporate proxy, and so everyone in the company is coming from the same IP address. Yeah, and no one likes it when their deployments fail because of an API failure like that. And definitely this is, So how does this fix it? What happens?
So usually developers, so to recap what you've just described, developers must upload to, besides they pushing the image to the public registry, to work, sometimes those websites, they do not offer availability commitment, nor the acceptable usage limit. So to work around this, sometimes we have to duplicate and manage those public images either locally or push to our own registries, which make it difficult to stay in sync with the new versions of the images and those, and that actually adds some operational complexity. So we have now announced the Amazon ECR Public, which is a fully managed registry that makes it easy for developers to publicly share container-based software worldwide for anyone to download. So anyone with or without an AWS account can use the Amazon ECR Public to pull the required Docker image. And together with that, we also have Amazon ECR Public Gallery, which is a website that allows anyone to browse and search for public images. They can view those the details provided by the developer and also see the pull commands. So developers no longer need to use different private and public registries as a mix when building and sharing their public container artifacts. So this service is, since it's a global service, it's not really relevant to any single region, and it's generally available.
And we've still got quotas on that, is that right? How do the quotas work?
Yes, actually, we still have quotas on that, and the quota is distinguished between authenticated users and the anonymous users. So, for example, the anonymous Docker pool will be limited at probably just 1 pull per second. And the authorized for the authorized actions, there will be much more than that. So I strongly recommend you to check the quota page of Amazon ECR public. Then you can figure out which is the best way to pull the images. But actually, in a lot of situations, since the containers are running in the cloud, then they must be going through a authenticated way to an authorized way to pull the required Docker image from this registry. So from the image sharing perspective, though, this enables everyone to share their Docker-based applications more widely across the world.
Thanks.
So that concludes the recap of the topic of containers, but we're not done yet. As a further level of abstraction, customers also run workloads without managing the compute capacity or any server through functions as a service, as known as AWS Lambda. So AWS created this category that the industry now calls serverless computing. So while customers have used AWS Lambda in amazing ways, they ask us for more flexibility to package and deploy their functions with more granularity in the pricing. So with AWS Lambda, we upload our code and we can run it without thinking about the servers. Many customers enjoy the way this works, but if we've invested in the container tooling for your development workflow, it's not easy to use the same approach to build applications running as Lambda functions. So to help you with that, AWS Lambda now supports packaging and deploying functions as container images, making it easy for customers to build serverless applications by using their familiar container tooling and dependencies. Customers will continue to use the benefit from AWS Lambda's automated, for example, the automatic scaling, high availability, short starting time for typically tens of milliseconds instead of the seconds, and also the native integration with more than 140 AWS services, and they only pay for what they use. So the support for packaging functions as container image is offered alongside the zip format. So customers can package their code and dependencies by starting with either a Lambda provided, by either AWS Lambda provided open source based image, or by using one of their preferred community or private enterprise images. Developers then leverage local tooling such as Docker CLI or AWS SAM CLI to build the image and upload it to Amazon ECR. They can deploy images of up to 10 gig in size. AWS Lambda will run their function as defined in the image when invoked. So this provides the users with the operational ease of AWS Lambda within the familiar container deployment and the development process and the environment as well.
Amazing. So effectively, you're now building Lambda the same way you're building containers.
That's exactly right. And how many times did we ask by the customer, they've been restrained by the size limit of the code they can push into the Lambda function? I think especially nowadays we do have machine learning workloads running as Lambda functions. So I think the NumPy, Pandas, those are very bulk size as a lot of files inside as dependencies, right?
Absolutely. Very big.
So now I'm gonna show you a demo of how this particular feature works. So since this is a video recorded demo, I will just do some fast forwarding just to show you some keyframes where the most important messages are presented. So here, as you can see, I have a very, very simple Lambda function. So this function is placed into a file named app.js. Hey, Paul, welcome to the session.
Hey, Nick.
Within this app.js, it does nothing really logical. It only returns a HTTP response with 200 and with the body of hello from Lambda via Docker. So this is a very simple Node.js application as a Lambda function. So together with that, we have a Docker file here. So the Docker file itself, as we can see, we're going to pull a image called Lambda Node.js with version 12 out of the public ECR. and we just install the dependency. Actually, we copy the application itself with the package.json. Then we run the npm install to have all the required dependencies installed. Then the entry point we have there is the app.handler. So that comes with the Docker file. Then after that, I do have a runbook here, which I put all the required command I need to run. So firstly, I'm going to run the Docker build to build this image at my local environment. So as you can see, I just successfully built it. So the next step, I'm going to copy and paste this command into my terminal. As you can see, this is a AWS CLI, which creates a repository in ECR. So at the moment, I've got all the output to be streamed into a file. The purpose of this is to not exposing my AWS account ID in this demo. And then I'm going to run that. That is a very straightforward step. After that, I will log in to my ECR as an authenticated user. Then I'll be able to push my image to this new created repository in ECR. So once I've done that, I can see the login succeeded displayed there. So the next step, I just tag my local image to be the image recognizable by the ECR. And the last step would be I just do a Docker push. So this is very, very standardized process. I believe as long as you're familiar with the Docker workflow, you know what I'm presenting here. So once we've got the image being pushed to the ECR repository, let's go to the AWS console. So I'm going to give this page a refresh. Then I can see my new created image can be found from the, I've got the repository there first. Then if I go to the repository itself, I can see the URI there. So I'm going to switch to the AWS Lambda console. So as you can see, we have another option here called container image besides creating the function. So now I'm going to give a function name. I just call it like container demo or something. And then I can paste the image URL into this field, or I can just browse whatever images I have from a selected repository. In this case, I do have a repository just created. I have an image just being pushed. Then I just select that, and I can create my function out of that straight away. It takes a while for the function to be created, but once that's created, I'm gonna use some very simple test event to test if my function works as expected. So as we've seen from the source code, it does nothing but to return a code 200 with the message like hello from Docker. So I do nothing with my test event. I just simply click test. Then let's check the output there. It just say hello from Lambda via Docker. So it's very, very straightforward. That concludes the demo. So what do you think about this, Paul?
I think that that so many of our customers, so many of our large enterprise customers are making the move to containerize their workloads, and also building as much as possible with serverless. And standardizing the tooling and the tool chaining is really important. And not to mention the fact that with many of those large enterprise customers, there is, compliance, regulation, and standardization around what they're doing. So being able to store those produced manifests in ECR, so a more central location for all of your manifests, I think that, again, that's another good use case there. Especially when we think about, some of the processes that might go through, and that might be including like container scanning. So if you're doing some sort of scanning across your code, now you've have a very similar pipeline for those serverless workloads, because they can still use and leverage all of those containerized toolings that you're using in your pipeline to push it through. And again, like centrally managing the produced manifest is a good thing.
Very, very spot on. So to conclude what we've experienced so far, developers now can continue making use of the process they are already familiar with. So from, let's say we start from building the container image, then we push the image to a registry. In this case, it could be ECR. And then instead of setting the container orchestration tool to run our applications, now we have another option from Lambda. By creating a function, then we can run our container-based applications as Lambda functions. So besides that, I'm also very happy to share with you that since we launched the Lambda in 2014, customers have been charged for the number of times the code is triggered. It's like the number of requests, and for the time the code has been executed, rounded up to the nearest 100 milliseconds. We are now running up duration to the nearest millisecond with no minimum execution time. So with this new pricing, customers is going to pay less most of the times. It's going to be more noticeable when you have the functions with the execution time much lower than 100 milliseconds, such as like the low latency APIs. And also, if you increase the memory to get the more CPU power and speed up your functions, you now get the benefit of a lower build duration below 100 milliseconds as well. That means that increasing performance and reducing latency is going to be cheaper than before. It's also worth mentioning that the maximum memory you can allocate to a function has been lifted from 3 gigabytes to 10 gigabytes. So this actually concludes the new updates from the world of serverless. We're still not done yet. Paul, do you have any updates from the database side of this topic?
So I do have some updates from the database side, and thanks, Nick, for all of those really, great announcements around serverless and Lambda. I still remember right back in the days when Lambda was announced and there was no ability to connect over VPC, so we were making public connections over the public internet, and seeing that multiple years ago was just a shift in phenomena of where we're working, where we're heading. Of the announcements we've seen today, I think there's some really good ones. I have seen my customers talk to me about wanting larger deployment sizes into Lambda. So, at the moment you're limited to, your 500 meg that you're going to head and push that up into S3, but having 10 gigs available if you've got some sort of like complicated PDF generation library or inference that you're doing from machine learning is now available to you within Lambda. I think that's really great. I also really love the Mac instance. I think, any of us that have gone through building iOS applications have had somebody somewhere running a Mac server or a MacBook somewhere. And I know someone in the chat talked about, the GPUs burning out. I'm sure that if people have been working with Mac for a while, they know at some point maybe they have burnt out one of the GPUs in the older MacBooks. But on databases and serverless, one of the largest announcements around databases and serverless was Amazon Aurora Serverless V2. And so our last release, or version 1 of Aurora Serverless, enables the ability to scale your database without having to turn it off. Now, so many of our customers have opted to move from hosting their own databases on bare metal or an EC2 to using our RDS service. And with that comes the ability to, if you need to, scale it up and down. But to do that, you need to effectively like restart that database instance. So customers have been talking to us about, how can I scale relational databases without having to like stop my application or take my application into downtime? Aurora Serverless V2 has come out and adjusted the way we look and think about leveraging scalability on relational databases. So now we can scale to hundreds of thousands of transactions. We can do that within fractions of a second. So turning on auto scaling within Aurora Serverless V2 enables our applications to scale all the way down at those those low usage times of the day, and all the way up like very, very fast. In fact, almost immediately, to be able to handle those heavy workloads. Even just this morning, Matt and I had a customer that it was talking about applications such as ticket sales. That obviously when ticket sales come on, there's large bursts of traffic. You need to have that scalability there, and pre-provisioning for that is complicated. You don't want to take down your application. You want it to be able to scale where it needs to scale, and you need that to happen automatically. So Aurora Serverless V2 enables us to do that, and we found that in many use cases where the traffic adjusts itself or is flexible is flexing throughout the day, we found that there's been up to 90% cost savings. One of the great features around Aurora Serverless V2 is that this includes the benefits that you get by leveraging our Aurora RDS capability, which is a MySQL and a Postgres compatible database, and you get the full capabilities that is on offer at the moment. So that includes parallel queries, global databases, so the ability to replicate those databases across geographic regions. Read replicas, we would expect that for any database offering. And Aurora offers backtrack, so effectively this is an undo button for our Aurora Relational Database Service. And what backtrack does is, allow you to undo a specific command that might have been executed on the database. I'm sure that if this group is a developer-specific group, at some point in time, somebody has run something on a production database. No matter how careful you are, it might happen, and it might be just a matter of that was expected to happen, but we want to roll that back because we wanted to look at something without having to dig through transactional logs or restore an old backup. So that ability is in there as well, as long as multi-AZ support. So Aurora Serverless V2 is available in preview today. So if that is something that you are interested in, talk to your TAM, and that's available in the MySQL flavor of Aurora at the moment. So Postgres will be available in preview soon, but as of today, that is available in preview with MySQL. So when have you seen customers talking specifically, Nick, around a requirement to scale relational databases?
Absolutely, especially when the traffic is not able to be well detected. For example, there's a huge amount of peak traffic coming to the environment. We definitely need to scale the database accordingly as fast as possible.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So on the second big announcement for Aurora is Babelfish. So Babelfish for PostgreSQL is an open source additional layer is how I'll sort of say it. So the definition of Babelfish is effectively a translation. Now, if you're familiar with front-end development, I'm sure you've used Babel to do transpilation of your JavaScript. And so what Babelfish for PostgreSQL is helping us with is customers that are looking to make a transition off SQL Server onto Postgres. And we do have services that have helped our customers move the schema across. So our database migration service helps customers make that transition from SQL Server into a Postgres database engine. But what about the application layer? This is often a sticking point where customers have pre-existing applications or customized applications that they've either purchased or they've built, and they are there and they're doing their job, and they're more legacy applications, but they want either potentially some of the advantages of that Aurora itself has to offer, or that Postgres engine has to offer, and more importantly, the costing that that Aurora offers, which is several times cheaper than your standard SQL Server RDS instance. So Babelfish is effectively a layer that sits below the JDBC driver and enables your application to continue to function as it is without recompilation, without the change of the JDBC driver, but deal with and interact with the Postgres database with Babelfish in the middle, handling that, connecting the two languages back up together. So your application continues to run. It thinks it's running on SQL Server, but the backend is actually running on Postgres. I know that we still have many of our customers that are, have either legacy or, even more recent applications that are wanting to move across to Postgres for those cost savings and the performance benefits that come along with that as well. And so this is like a very useful piece of software that's coming out. The availability of this is coming in 2021 and is available on GitHub. So Amazon has made this an open source project, so there's full transparency for anybody that's using this library, and which means that if you did have a specific implementation or something that was running differently on your environment, you could go ahead and make a fork of that code. You could customize it how you want to use it, and then you could pull it back and use it in your application. If you feel that this is beneficial to the community, you can go ahead and submit that full pull request and see whether you can do some contributions back to the project here, and then somebody else might want to benefit off the back of that. I mean, Nick, do you have customers that are looking to move off SQL Server that have hit this roadblock before?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, I believe the benefit of making no change to the code, we can definitely help customer accelerating this journey. We've seen applications used to be running on Microsoft SQL Server, but maybe customers are looking for example, whether there's any chance they can put the database engine on top of some other open source databases, in this case Postgres. But changing the code, especially the database logic relevant code, is risky. So this double fish for Postgres SQL, I believe it can definitely help customer to narrow down the gap between the application and the database by making no change to the application code, but still have the database running on top of Postgres with leveraging all the great features from Postgres itself.
Yep. So the next announcement that I'm going to talk about is, and this may have been touched on if you went to any of the sessions around analytics and data, is AWS Glue Elastic Views. Now, this is a feature that's in preview at the moment, but is quite relevant for any sort of modern day developer that has been working with microservices. And if you understand microservices, it means that you're building something like encapsulated around your domain, and you're building that service to do, effectively one thing and do that well. And so when we think about microservices, we're thinking about like the different persistence engine behind that microservice that is used to store or access that data. And that might be DynamoDB, it might be Aurora, it might be a different type of RDS database. It doesn't really matter what it is, but there'll be some sort of different way to have that. Now, your application is going to typically interface with your microservices through an API, and that can be like very, very useful for your application to decouple the larger applications. What happens then when you need to do something on your application level that requires a lot of data from a lot of different microservices and bring those together? You may have an application, and let's just say, for argument's sake, again, it is like a ticketing application that has high transactions per second. We want to make sure that when people are buying and purchasing those tickets, we have as much throughput as we have. In an instance like that, DynamoDB might be a very appropriate data source for a back-end application. We know that it'll scale, we know that it's key value, we know that we can look that up. However, performing aggregate functions across something like DynamoDB can be a little more challenging. It does require you to be a little more upfront with your design and your key designs with that table. And so you might find yourself a little bit down the path where you want to perform some of this more aggregate functions or more data reporting capabilities, but you want to do that in almost close to real time or real time off the back of that data. And so what AWS Glue Elastic Views does is enable you to select a source, and in this example here, it might be DynamoDB, and then select a destination. And that destination can either be, at the moment, Elasticache, Elasticsearch, or S3. And then what it will do is attach those two, the source and the destination together, and make like a real-time copy of that data. So move that across. Any conflicts that might occur in regards to typing, so if you're using times or strings or integers and floats, you can go ahead and address that and set the mapping up correctly. And then you can interface with the end view, which is a materialized view, in the same way that we would on, if we were on an old relational database and we joined many tables together, we'd have a single view. We could interface with that without having to care about the complexity beneath that. It enables us to interact now with data that came out of DynamoDB in a relational manner. So we can query that data that has come across, we can do aggregate functions, we can do filtering, and we can start joining some of that data with materialized views that are coming out of the other microservices that you need to do. So your front end, which is producing those transactions and reading and writing directly to Dynamo to ensure that people will be able to purchase the tickets and put those through, is fully taken care of within that microservice. And then your reporting to determine what is the most popular event at this point in time can be produced and viewed through AWS Glue Elastic Views. So I'm really excited to see this, because there's always been a challenge when we've had developers say, how do I stitch these multiple data sources together and do that in close to real time? Next up, we've got just a brief announcement around application integration. So Amazon MQ for RabbitMQ, which is now being released and is generally available. So many of our applications are using message brokers or message services to send messages between their platforms. I've worked with RabbitMQ in the past, and I've also worked with ActiveMQ. So ActiveMQ was released, I think, in 2017, and bringing these services into a managed infrastructure has meant that customers that do have a legacy application, or they're on the path of migrating and moving some of those applications to cloud and making them more cloud native, really want to focus on building on top of their application layer rather than building and maintaining the servers that these queuing systems are run on. So the move and the announcement of moving RabbitMQ to a managed infrastructure is something that our customers have been calling for. They've said, hey, I've got these queues, I do need to move them. Eventually in time, I might go ahead and look at moving to one of the more cloud native options. But for now, we'd just like you to take care of managing the infrastructure for that. Nick, do you have any comments on this one?
So I guess we are looking at here is a fully managed service for RabbitMQ as well, because previously we've got ActiveMQ as a managed service, but there are still customers, a lot of customers are leveraging RabbitMQ with their applications, and they still have to rely on EC2 or other compute resource to run the RabbitMQ. So they have operational overheads such as patching, updating OS at OS level as well. So I guess this can definitely lift away a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting work.
Very nice quote there. Very well, fit in very well there, Nick. And just to recap for those that might be a little unfamiliar with Amazon MQ and SQS and SNS. SNS and SQS are sort of recommended for born in the cloud applications. They are like a simpler API, so you interact completely via an API. They have unlimited throughput, they're fully managed, and you pay per request on those services. Whereas Amazon MQ, that's ActiveMQ and RabbitMQ, so more recommended for migration to the cloud, so probably not recommended for your brand new application. They're backwards compatible with the existing ActiveMQ and RabbitMQ API. Feature rich, very low latency. Amazon manages the infrastructure for that, and your payment model is pay per hour and pay per gigabyte. At this point here, I think we've got Matt coming in. So Matt said at the start he was there at 2019. I was there as well. And I think the biggest miss, one of the biggest miss, and Matt might laugh this, is, I'm starting to run out of socks. It's been over a year now. Where's my swag? Where's my pairs of socks? So I'll hand over to Matt that's going to talk about some of the announcements that have come in with AI and ML.
Perfect, thanks Paul. That was fantastic. Serverless v2 for Aurora is something that both of us are diving into over the next couple of days, so I'm quite excited to get hands-on with that and gather some of your learnings. Now, one of the really interesting things about 2020 was, we have a huge breadth of AI and ML services. We really invest very, very heavily in the space at Amazon, and we actually had I think it was the very first time actually, we had a full-on dedicated keynote to machine learning, because we really realized how important it is. And we realized that there's a whole breadth of things, of people that we need to help work with on these types of things. If you look at it, you've got really smart, much more clever than me, data scientists that are inventing new machine learning algorithms, and we've got to provide them an environment that's really, really easy to work with. And then, all the way back to development teams where the focus is more on the code itself and building the applications that the machine models are going to work with. we've got to make it easier to package those things up and more accessible for everyone with each of our different services at AWS. You don't want to, as developers, have to tap a machine learning scientist on the back every single time you want to do a particular thing within your application. You want to get the best value from them at the times that you need something very, very customized to your business. And so machine learning is a really big part of AWS, and I was really impressed to see that we had a full-on keynote around it. So I'll kick off into what we've got in the space that's going to be relevant for everyone on here. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is Amazon DevOps Guru. So this is a really fascinating service. Being a technical account manager myself, we're dealing with incidents all the time. I was Melbourne-based, and I was actually on a number of incidents on Monday. As a matter of fact, we were trying to help troubleshoot some issues that we're seeing in different customer environments. So the DevOps Guru is really a tool that's focused in this particular space. And it's really cool because what it does is once you've turned it on in your account, you've effectively got a way to automatically monitor any workload that comes in, anything brand new as you're launching new apps. What it's doing is it's evaluating through, CloudWatch and CloudTrail and all these, data streams that we can aggregate, and it's looking for anomalies. So it looks at this is how your application normally runs, and this seems to be the fine state of it. And, over here, we're seeing these particular things happen, and that doesn't look normal. And so what we can do is when we see these patterns, we can automatically make a decision based on how you've configured, Amazon DevOps Guru to make a call out and maybe page someone or aggregate these logs and send an email over to this particular group or do nothing but monitor. So it's really easy to use. There's pretty much no configuration that's required for DevOps Guru. It does that automatic monitoring of workloads and learnings. And so the whole idea is hopefully this reduces the amount of incidents that might occur. Hopefully it reduces the mean time to recovery within your applications as well. Hopefully we get a really quick resolution whenever there's an issue that's detected, but we also block all that noise. No one really likes to get paged, and I know as a TAM, 24/7. And so any tool that we have in this space is going to be incredibly valuable, especially if you're within a development team that you build it, you own it, and you've got that mentality. So this is hopefully going to save you a couple of late nights. So really, really cool. Definitely check it out. It's in preview at the moment. It's not in Sydney yet, but keep your eyes peeled out for this one. I'm really excited from what I've seen and what I've played around with it to have it come into region. The next one that I wanted to talk about is Amazon Lookout for Metrics. So this is similar-ish, but quite different. So the idea behind Lookout for Metrics is that it's a general purpose anomaly detection service. So similar to DevOps Guru, but instead of looking at logging files and all of that, it's looking at time series data. So it's looking at what's occurring in S3, what's occurring in RDS, what's happening with Salesforce's Zendesk if you integrate them. And it looks for anomalies that could be operational if you're storing operational data within any of those services that I mentioned or platforms. But it can also look at things like customer engagement. So, one of the things that you might see, and it might be a soft thing, it might be nothing to do with the workloads themselves. You might see, a certain section of your website that just doesn't have the same amount of logins, or it's got logins failing, or, people aren't navigating to it at the moment, people aren't completing purchases. You could look at that particular data and it could make an observation and then follow through with a series of actions to alert people again. If it sees those types of behaviors, high bounce rates, for example, as well. So it's kind of more of a general platform in the space, and you can use it for sales metrics, marketing. We've got a ton of use cases that we're seeing customers want to use this service with, and it's all based on your data that you might have in S3, RDS, or any of the major CRM platforms that we're integrating with. So this is really cool. It's worth checking out. I'd definitely keep your eyes out for this one as well. It's in preview and coming.
I think that's really.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Matt. I think that's a really interesting one, because there is times where we will have potentially a new release, or somebody internal to the organization flicks one of those switches and, potentially accidentally makes it so that you can't check out. Now, you may have no code issue, the code might be running completely fine, but somebody's accidentally clicked that switch and said, do not check out. And, having you be alerted by something that's looking for anomalies rather than your customers start calling or complaining or twittering at you can be incredibly valuable. And it's like you said, reduce that mean time to recovery. Like, these things are going to happen. And when you can see that earlier and not have to have, a massive, great wall of dashboards that somebody's watching actively, but to have that proactively alert and look for those anomalies and warn you about it is very handy.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's like I also think of like those times where you're building an application and you might not have full unit test coverage. Surely everyone always has, of course, but something slips through the cracks per se, and then suddenly a button on your website that's critical for end users to have access to just disappears, or a flow doesn't work because you've changed logic in one section, it's broken a particular flow that you've got on the site in another area. And yeah, like as you mentioned, Paul, like the site works completely perfectly and as expected. This is a really cool mitigation tool to go like, hey, normally we see navigation here, maybe it's worth checking out. Is something wrong? I don't think there's really any other tool that kind of does that, which, yeah, it's pretty neat. The next one that I'm going to talk about is Redshift machine learning. So data analysts and database developers want to leverage all the data that they've got in their Redshift data warehouses. They want to apply machine learning models to that. And at the moment, what they're doing is they're effectively going to the teams that are working on machine learning within their businesses. And as data analysts, they're going, we've got all this data in Redshift. Could you help generate a bunch of different models because we want to look at these aspects of our data? It's really broad in terms of use. It depends on what you're storing within Redshift, of course. But the idea is that data analysts can actually just use SQL-like language directly within Redshift and say they want to pull together a view with all these bits of data sets, and they pretty much hit the go button. And what we're doing in the background is we're automatically applying what we think is probably the best machine learning model for that we've got out of the box for the data set that they're providing, and then we're trying to give some results through that machine learning to them. So that hopefully saves the data scientist's time, and the data analysts can just quickly get started with whatever it is that they need to do, get their jobs done very, very fast. And same with database developers. So this is pretty cool. It's in preview as well. Reach out to your technical account managers in particular if you want to have a look at one of these services. Sometimes we can get you on a preview early. Within Australia and New Zealand, we've got Mary Law. She's not watching this, but she's fantastic. She's a Redshift SME, and she's so excited about this particular feature, and we'd love for anyone that's interested to be able to leverage it as soon as it comes out. Now, the next one is Amazon Neptune Machine Learning. So Amazon Neptune is a graph-based database service. It's really there for highly connected data sets. So if you've got a huge network of almost like linked data, if you think of social networks and all the contacts that you've got and all the metadata that surrounds it, that's kind of the perfect case for Amazon Neptune. I'm still getting familiar with this particular database technology as it's quite new, but one of the cool things that we've done is we've brought in Neptune machine learning as a feature that you can use on top of this database. And so what we've done is we've got graph neural networks that can traverse the graph database that you've got, and it can draw up relationships of the data within that. And so you can simply type in queries that you want, and it will try and generate out all the related information within that query that might be relevant to your search. So it's kind of like it's really cool because you can do this with billions of entries of data, and you can see billions of relationships at the same time. And the machine learning aspect helps to clean that data up and give it back to you in a more consumable and aggregated way. So this is really cutting edge new stuff. I need to explore it a lot more, but I'm pretty excited about having a play with this as it comes through and available on Sydney. But this is another one that I'd like to call out. With all that being said, we're actually at the end of the segment nearly. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that we have a quiz. So some of you that might be familiar with some of the events that the Solution Architects and the TAMs run, we like to give away a couple of prizes at the very end. So if you've been relatively attentive on Twitch, hopefully now you're going to get rewarded. What I'll do is I'll switch over to Kahoot, which is our quiz system that we've got. And we are going to ask a series of questions. You can use your web browser or download the Kahoot app. And you've got the chance to win either a Amazon Echo, which is pretty cool, or $50 Amazon.com.au vouchers. So let me get my screen share happening for everyone. And here we go. We should be in business. Call out if you can't see anything. But effectively go to kahoot.it within your web browser. Works on mobile, works on desktop. If you're on mobile, you can use the app as well, which is fairly fast, and we'll go through these series of questions. So what I'll do is I'll give everyone maybe a minute or two to join. And whilst we do that, Paul, I can't do it. I can't name a top service because there was a lot this year. But what would you say maybe is your top three? Maybe we'll stick to top three.
Top three. I would still go back and say AWS Glue Elastic Views. I think that's something that so many of us developers have wondered what we can do and how do we start bringing that together. Mm-hmm. The tooling that has come out supporting like SageMaker, I think there's like a lot of opportunity for developers to start leveraging what's available within machine learning and to incorporate that as part of our role without having to be a data scientist. So being able to leverage those is really important. And I think for coolness factor, I think the Mac instances is something that it's like you could tell across the industry that we needed this, that we wanted it. And that was a big surprise to me. So, Amazon has clearly worked very hard on this. And I guess that falls off the success of the Nitro hypervisor in our ability to be able to functionally do that. Just the ability to have thousands of Mac minis sitting in data centers that we can use on demand, is pretty phenomenal. And even if you were just like looking to try your new application on a completely fresh install of a Mac, like it's just an amazing use case. Not to mention, fully cloudifying and automating your build pipelines for iOS builds.
Yeah, I think as an iOS developer, I'm going to be particular to that feature, but I really liked what they did with Lambda as well. I thought Lambda had a really good series of announcements. So I think if you group all the Lambda items together, it's hard to work out whether they win over EC2 Mac instances, in terms of announcements. DevOps Guru was really cool as well, and maybe I'd slip in a fourth, which is like fault injection simulator. We haven't really talked about it on this session, but it's definitely worth a look. Again, I'll kick off the Kahoot. I think the numbers have settled in 2 seconds. So dial in last minute if you want to score some merch. But yeah, I guess it's been a really big reInvent for all of us. And even though we were remote, we saw like a million really cool things.
Yep.
Reach out to your TAM, reach out to your solution architects on your accounts if you want to dive into any of the detail. Everything's on the AWS website, so you can go to the reInvent section. You can see everything, access to documentation. But I think we've settled. So let's go into the game. So you will see 4 colors on your screen when I press start, and these will be aligned to each of the 4 options on my screen. I'll read them out. The idea is to answer as quickly and as accurately as possible, so it works based off of time and correct answer. And as I mentioned beforehand, we do have an Amazon Echo, and we have 2 $50 Amazon.com.au vouchers up for grabs. We'll have to grab your details. So what I'll want you guys to do is within the chat, whoever comes first will get the Echo. call out your name and say, hey, I came first, because your name might not match what you have in the Twitch chat. And we'll whisper to you or reach out privately, and we'll collect some extra details so we can ship it off to you. And then same goes for those Amazon $50 vouchers for second and third place. So let's start. So reInvent, recap. What is the first question? 3, 2, 1. The first question is, what is now the max memory for a Lambda function? Is it 3,000 megabytes, 4,000, 10,000, or 8,000? We've got 5 answers so far. 9. We're going back a bit because I think it was towards the start of the session that we asked this question. Nearly everyone's
I think Nick talked about this, and I think you're right. You know, Matt, on practicality versus coolness, like the announcements of Lambda is probably where the most benefit is coming for our customers, especially if they're in the serverless environments. Yeah,
exactly. So it was 10,000 megabytes. So congratulations to everyone that picked yellow. We had 6 people. There are roughly 8 questions, and so at the moment, Hernet is leading the leaderboard. Tim G is coming second, followed by Traceroute, very close behind. The next question is, Aurora Serverless v2 can scale. Within seconds, in fractions of a second, in minutes, it can scale, but does require you to do a reprovisioning of your database. Choose from those 4 options. Here we go, let's see. So it was fractions of a second. You don't have to do any reprovisioning, which is awesome. And how are we looking now? So Traceroute has moved up. They got their answer in the fastest. Hernet's dropped to second, but pretty close behind. JT's moved up, and you've got Jason moving up the leaderboard as well. So the next one is, Babelfish is an SQL technology that enables deployments of SQL on EC2, or it enables apps to integrate MS SQL, but operates at Aurora Postgres, or requires recompilation of your source code, or requires a new JDBC driver to operate. So pick from each of those 4 options. Perfect. Yep. So it enables apps to interact as MS SQL and then operates on Aurora Postgres, which is like pretty amazing when you think about it. So how are we looking? Hernet is on fire. He's moving up very rapidly with his answers. He must have a good Australian or New Zealand internet connection, probably New Zealand, because they've got a lot faster internet than us. JT and Traceroute are second and third. Next question. Graviton2 C6GN instances are what percentage better in price performance than C5N instances? So 20, 40, 60, or 80?
Right to the start of the session now. That was what I talked about in compute at the start.
Yeah, that's right.
Brings the memory back.
So it was 40%. So it's a big jump if you think about it. So better price, better performance, definitely worth considering upgrading to, checking out if your workloads can run on those instance types. So Hernet is still in the lead. He is quite massively in the lead. So he looks like he's coming. He really wants that that echo. Jason and JT are following. Next one is EC2 Mac 1 Metal instances have what CPU? The Apple M1, Intel i3s, Intel i5s, or Intel i7s? So it was the Intel i7. So we saw a couple of people pick the M1s. It's a little bit tricky, this one. The M1s are coming, so they're on the plan, but at launch, it's the Intel i7s that are available, which is pretty cool. And by the way, M1 laptops are amazing. So if you're definitely looking at a new laptop, it's worth having a look at that one. So we have Hernet still in the lead, JT follows, and then Jeffrey. And we've got a couple of people moving up quite fast. Question 6. How many IOPS can you achieve with R5B instances and IO2 block express? I think this one's a particularly hard one if you weren't fully paying attention, actually. Some very close values there, and then one that could be correct that's quite a lot higher.
I'd be Googling that one real quick.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, so a lot of people thought it was 1.1 mil. It's not quite. It's 260,000 IOPS, but that's still pretty amazing.
I think we can take that as a feature request, Matt. People want 1.1 mil.
Definitely. Maybe next year. Who knows?
Bigger is better.
So Hernet is still in the lead, followed by JT and Jeffrey. We have 2 questions left. How much writable disk space does a Lambda function as container have at runtime? Is it 128 MB, 256 MB, 512 MB, or is it 1 GB? This is probably important to know. It was 512 megabytes. Yeah, I've encountered this a couple of times, but you've got a bit more breathing space now with Lambda memory through the reInvent announcements, but containers in particular are 512. So yeah, excellent work. Let's see if the dashboard's changed. Traceroute, wow, that's a big jump. Straight to 2, Hernet's still in the lead, and you've got JT as number 3. This is the final question, so get the most competitive if you want to move this dashboard. Let's have a look at what it is. Which one of the following can be installed as an add-on to an EKS cluster? Is it a Amazon VPC CNI? Is it Core DNS? Is it KubeVirt? Or is it Calico? I'm sure that we've got a couple of EKS experts that are watching the live stream, so we'll have to see the results, but yeah. So it is the Amazon VPC CNIs. Congratulations to the 3 that got that right. We had an even distribution. It was actually quite a tough question, but congrats to the 3 that got it right. Let's have a look at the podium. 3rd place goes to Jeffrey. Awesome work. 2nd place goes to Traceroute. And 1st place, let's see, I have a guess. It's Hernet. So congratulations. Can each of you ping us on the Twitch chat? Just say, hey, Jeffrey here, Traceroute here, Hernet here, and we'll whisper to you, we'll private message you, and we'll collect some details so that we can send across those prizes. 1st place is the Echo, 2nd and 3rd is $50 Amazon.com.au vouchers, which is really nice because you've got a wide range of things to select from there. The next thing that I wanted to call out as well is that we have a survey that we'd appreciate everyone filling out if you've got some spare time. We really want to get your feedback on how the session went. Really keen to hear about what you're excited about the most as well. But with that being said, I'll wrap up and I'll stop my screen share and we'll go back together as a group, I think. Here we go. I think we're all together. So what do you guys think about that ultimately?
I think, like you said, and Josh said at the start, there was just thousands of hours of content. And this year was such a different experience for all of us that, I think it was good. We were able to focus on what we wanted to do and not have to sit in those lines. But, look, I'll be honest, I can't wait to get back to Las Vegas and feel what it's like at reInvent. Not to mention the socks.
Get Foo Fighters back, right? And Deadmau5 and everyone else. We always have a really cool lineup of things at night times to do in reInvent, and the ball pit as well. But it was nice not having lines and being able to jump straight to the content that we wanted, select it, and it's pretty cool that it's all on YouTube now, and we've gotten a lot more content than what we've gotten in previous years from reInvent.
I definitely liked the fact that it was more inclusive. Globally, we were able to get a lot more people involved by doing it streaming. There was no barrier of airfares or ticket cost, etc. So from that perspective, I found the video delivery to be much more inclusive, which I think is very important as we look at our global audiences, especially.
Without mentioning the jet lag. we don't have to be tortured by the jet lag when we watch those sessions, and we just stay in a comfy area with maybe a coffee or something around us, and we can just flexible make use of our time. But to be honest, as Paul said, I do miss the time we could all attend the conference physically. The atmosphere will be very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have to wait and see what conferences look like in the future as things change.
We will gather together sometime, physically.
Excellent.
So feel free
Well,
to ask questions in the chat. I can see that there's a couple of questions. One about do we do some work involving healthcare? Yes, we do. And in fact, there were a couple of reInvent announcements around AI and ML in healthcare, which I don't have the details in front of me on.
Jesse's just provided some info around that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jesse. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking to you all. And thank you. Hopefully you've filled out the survey. We look at all comments that come back on those surveys, so please be honest. And thank you.
Yeah, we'll stay on the chat, but thanks everyone for attending. It was hopefully a really good session for you all, and I think it's pretty cool to bring a snippet of reInvent back to everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks Josh, Nick.
Thanks everyone.
Matt.
Thanks.
Great being here.